Cursed panels. Now this one makes the rounds. You'll have seen it different places, on forums, on lists, just scrolling if you look up silly out of context panels. But maybe you haven't seen it, maybe this is your first time. We're gonna be talking about the Punish Me Daddy, I Deserve It panel, starring a massive Jor-El spanking a crying Superman. Now out of context, this panel is a lot, and even in context it still is, but in a different way. With a panel like this, it begs the question, just what is going on here? How did we get here? Is this the author's barely disguised fetish? Well, we're gonna dive in. And it's actually deeper than one would assume based on looking at this panel. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and I'm very excited to explain to you why Superman feels like he deserves to be punished. This panel comes to us from World's Finest 201 from 1971. So deep in the transitional phase, moving from the Silver Age to the Bronze Age. This was a period where you would often find stories with Silver Age happenings but Bronze Age tone, which tended to be more serious and emotionally ponderous, which could yield some interesting results, like the story we're going to talk about today. The story in question is Superman and Green Lantern, A Prize of Peril, written by Denny O'Neil with art by Dick Dillon, inks Joe Giella. Now some of you may be going, wait, Green Lantern? I thought World's Finest was a Superman-Batman team-up book. World's Finest ran from 1941 to 1986. Now while at first they would often appear on the cover together, Batman and Superman didn't have a story together until issue 71. And that was in the year 1954. This series, as one can see, was very long-lived, and that means that sometimes it would branch out and try to do new things. And that would include a brief period in the early 70s where Batman was off the book and Superman teamed up with different heroes. Now as for this World's Finest issue, 201, it promises a clash between the Man of Steel and the Green Gladiator.
Let the battle for Earth begin.
Now it can be told. The secret story of the fantastic fight to save the human race. Who's fighting for us? Oh gosh, is it Hal? Now in this story we have Bronze Age Hal, who is very much disaster human Hal, and at this point him and Superman didn't really get along on a personal level, which always made for some entertaining meetings between the two. Before Clark was a disappointed dad in 2023 to Fire, and also in 2023 to Paige Settler, the Power Girl formerly known as Karen, he was there in the 70s to be disappointed about Hal Jordan. The story opens on a set of meteors heading towards Earth, and both Green Lantern and Superman see them and devise ways to deal with them. But because they're both going to come out from different vantage points and literally different positions, they're going to end up causing problems for the other. Well, actually, Green Lantern is going to cause more problems for Superman. There's also a very sassy editor's note about why Hal's ring is at half power. Note, the reason the ring isn't up to snuff is amply explained in Green Lantern's own mag. That doesn't tell me what issue it is. How dare you not predict that I'd be reading this in 2023? I'm joking, of course, that would be incredibly entitled. But it is an example of why having the actual issue number can be helpful. Of course, fandom was different, and the idea that people would be reading these years later in generational fandom was still a new and burgeoning idea, even though you would see fans of comics moving into the industry. Two would-be saviors, each with his own unique solution to the same problem.
By creating turbulence in the upper atmosphere, I'm erecting a wall of air, which should do to keep those rocks away.
No problem here. I'll just shove the swarm a bit, increase its speed so the individual chunks will burn up before hitting the ground. So Hal's method causes Superman's to backfire a bit, and he has to fly around and make sure that things like planes and buildings aren't hit. He is not impressed because really if he hadn't been there, that probably would have happened anyway. So he flies up, sees Hal, and they have a great fight. At least in terms of entertainment value, that is.
Green Lantern, it figures. That was a pretty dumb stunt, shooting your power beam around without making sure of your target.
Look, you're the guy with a telescopic vision. Why didn't you check the area before you blundered into action?
Blundered? You should have realized I'd spot the danger and...
Superman, are you saying that people should just not try because you're gonna be around? What if you're not around? This is the kind of logic that led to Lois jumping off a cliff to try to get your attention. Pal, for all I knew you were brooding in your fortress of solitude. Or whatever the devil you do there. It is a lot of brooding. Sometimes other things, but brooding's definitely on the agenda.
Lantern, I've been meaning to speak to you about your attitude. For months you've been moping around like a wounded prima donna.
Sure. And for years you've been coming on like the granddaddy of greatness. Granddaddy of greatness is one of my favorite insults that anyone's called Superman. There's a pause and ellipses before Hal goes into his speech, so it's like he thought about it. He pulled that out. He's been thinking it for a while. Now their argument is interrupted by one of the Guardians who says this is unseemly. It's unbecoming for the champions of Earth to behave this way. There's only one way to settle this, and that's pistols at dawn. Actually, it's a contest at dawn. The winner gets to patrol the Earth. That doesn't sound like a good prize at all. So much happens on the Earth all the time. It's always almost getting destroyed or having some kind of havoc wreaked upon it, I'd be trying to throw this contest. Go home and practice diving. Now, neither Superman or Green Lantern really notice that this is odd. That either says something about how the Guardians normally act or something about how annoyed they are with each other. Probably both. The only thing Superman is concerned about is how they're gonna make this a fair fight for Hal, because I mean, he's so much stronger and faster than Hal. He's just gonna crush him. He thinks all of this as he flies off to his Fortress of Solitude to brood about it.
In any case, I'd better alert law enforcement agencies not to expect any help from either myself or GL for the next few days.
Next few days? How long are you planning on this to take? What are you gonna do to him? Note, this is why the story had to be suppressed at the time. Knowing that Superman and Green Lantern were out of action, the criminal element would have had a field day. Because they were missing or because of how petty this all is? In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light. Seems a bit silly to refer to Superman as evil, but I need this little ritual to sort of remind me who I am. Hal, are you okay? I mean, Hal is rarely okay. Not that the stories often acknowledge that. And I mean actually acknowledge it, not a I don't even know what Will is kind of thing. Regardless, Hal is having a clear crisis here, to the point where dueling Superman to guard Earth makes sense to him. Superman and Green Lantern show up the next morning for this contest, which is to be judged by Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate?
But you should be across the vibratory dimension in Earth too.
I've breached that void for reasons of no concern to you, and have been enlisted by the Guardian in this manner.
Translation, I wanted to see two heroes fight. So the contest is, they have to touch a purple dragon. They have to go through these two ectoplasm tunnels, and at the end is a purple dragon, and the first person to touch it wins. But on the way there, they'll have to face what they fear the most.
Assume your places.
One question first. Superman has a few advantages over me, like speed and strength.
You forget he is vulnerable to magic. I have so arranged the contest that you are equal for its duration.
And so, despite all the red flags everywhere that should have been raised at this point, they fly into the ectoplasm tunnels. They're each so annoyed with each other and wrapped up in their own issues. It's fascinating. That part of it isn't really explored, but it's a really interesting backdrop to just keep in mind as you're reading this. So now we get two separate segments where they must confront their fears. Hal's is very interesting. A lot of it is him worrying about whether he has a fear in the first place and what that would be, because he assumes that they've all been stamped out because he's now a Green Lantern. So he's even trying to come up with fears for himself. But Hal thinks that he must fear nothing, not even bondage. Suddenly, from nowhere,
A cable or something sticky as the devil. As I thought, my ring's useless against it. Stuff is yellow. And more's on the way, being wrapped up like a birthday present. Wonder who the lucky kitty is who'll get me. These strands are not only sticky, they stink. What's that odd scraping noise? Sounds like it's coming toward me.
Leaving the awkward phrasing aside, Hal is confronted by a giant spider. But it's not the spider that he's afraid of. Even he notes that he doesn't have arachnophobia. It gets pretty deep here. Hal's fear isn't the spider, but the fear of the loss of control, symbolized by his loss of access and the ability to use his ring. This is triggering a deeper fear, that he, the man, Hal Jordan, isn't worthy or a hero, that it's just the ring.
Use my muscle, my will. If I try, I can break these bonds.
And I'm free. Where Green Lantern failed, plain Hal Jordan, the ordinary man who's really me, succeeded. That's pretty deep, Hal. What a breakthrough. But he doesn't really dwell on it or think about it, which is also very Hal. He flies on. There's a purple dragon to touch. Which of course now takes us over to Superman. And I think you can now guess how this spanking panel is about to arise. Superman's fear stems from his insecurity surrounding his relationship to Krypton and his birth parents, specifically his father, Jor-El. A man who in his mind is a bit unknowable and also an imposing authority figure, and so he manifests as a literal giant towering over him. And not only that, he's extremely disappointed. Clark, or Cal as Jor-El calls him, doesn't know what his father wanted from him, and so he just starts to assume that the choices he made were the wrong ones.
You thought I was killed when Krypton exploded, eh? Well, you were wrong. These many years I've been observing your antics, and let me say, I'm very disappointed in you, young man. Instead of following in my footsteps and becoming a scientist, you've frittered away your time in pursuits best left to others less gifted.
I'm sorry, Father.
In context, this moment is really sad, and definitely not the funny meme panel it is when shared out of context. Here we're looking at a Superman who has a lot of trauma he hasn't had a chance to fully process, but it's also delivered in a bit of a Silver Age fashion, because then we're gonna have this spanking montage, which is gonna make some of what's conveyed not come across quite the way it was intended to, and even less so for a later reader, where the context of these scenes on a cultural level can have different implications. Because of course the social mores and the way people look at things and the the way they know that things were placed inside and hidden meanings and stuff just mean that you engage with the text differently. And even at the time, I'm sure this read as an odd choice. I really do understand what they're trying to go for. Superman feeling that he needs to be punished by his father as an authority figure, and then they're just going to corporal punishment for it, and that's infantilizing him, but it comes across oddly.
You say you're sorry, but you're not. I'm going to have to punish you. I've always wondered whether my father would have approved of me. There's been no way of telling till this moment.
And this will hurt me more than it hurts you, son.
Punish me, Daddy. I deserve it.
Even knowing this is a scene of Superman having a full-grown regression moment, it can still feel like a bizarre kink panel. But there's a lot of thoughts that Superman's working through as he's being spanked.
I guess every orphan secretly fears not living up to his parents' expectations. And I'm doubly an orphan. I lost my mother and father and my world while still an infant. I feel like I'm still a baby. And of course, that's exactly how I'm expected to feel.
Superman is able to have an epiphany. He is a man. He's not a baby, and he doesn't have to adhere to what he assumes that his father would have wanted for him, because he also recognizes that these are all his assumptions, his projections. This isn't Jor-El. This is his biggest fear. It's also very interesting to potentially examine his feeling that he needs to be punished. Is it survivor's guilt? Is it fear of not living up to expectations? Is it a shame over feeling that he's not Kryptonian enough? There's a lot of ways you could look at this on top of what's presented, or even leading off from it. He also even says he would give up being Superman to be an ordinary citizen on Krypton. That's a lot. But forget all that. There's a purple dragon to touch. They're still all in on this contest, and Hal really pushes to the end to make sure that he's the one to touch the purple dragon. It sounds like some kind of bizarre drug reference. I know it's not, but it's like he's got to ride the white horse. He's got to trip the light fantastic. He's got to touch the purple dragon. But once he does, something is wrong, because of course it is. This was all a ruse. Someone wanted them to touch this dragon, which is now on a rampage attacking the Justice League satellite. It was a secret magic spell. Superman and Green Lantern have to work together to stop this dragon and save their teammates, and then see who did this. But they still have issues. Have you noticed, faced with common danger, we've forgotten all about our game?
We should never have begun it, because we let ourselves be used as pawns in a scheme to destroy the Justice League.
There he goes again, the granddaddy of greatness. Hal just called battling in a contest to see who could protect the Earth a game. Hal's not okay. So who did this? It was Felix Faust, the Fiend.
The fools, how easily they were duped into destroying themselves. I needed the beam from Green Lantern's ring to activate the dragon spell.
I have to believe there were easier ways to get Hal to touch a purple dragon than this elaborate ruse. Just put it in his apartment, he'll trip into it. They capture him very easily, and we're left on what's meant to be a lesson.
No need to check with your bosses, GL. Faust undoubtedly cast an illusion of the Guardian we talked with.
Check. And that about wraps it up. I can't say I'm sorry this all happened. We had a precious reminder that rivalry and jealousy brew nothing but trouble. Wouldn't it be nice if they learned it too? Hal's talking about the Earth. He's having all this existential dread about overpopulation and pollution. He's going through a lot. Just that phrasing, rivalry and jealousy. I find the idea of Hal and Clark inherently having friction and a bit of dislike for each other fascinating. And the idea of it stemming from jealousy even more so. There are so many ways one could look at that. But beyond that, a bit of friction between the characters really enhances the universe. I just mean characters in general having different relationships with each other. In a universe so large, it's good. It makes it feel more expansive and compelling and relatable. Just to know that some characters are going to work better together than others, or are going to work well professionally but not personally. It also leaves room for those characters to grow and change. And then if some do end up becoming friends, it really feels hard won. Or if they fall out, you can really feel that betrayal or that sadness or that loss. There's a balance to be struck. You don't want that to be the only focus, but at the same time, it's nice to have those moments that make you be able to guess how characters are going to react, or make you anticipate things like, oh no, Superman and Green Lantern have to work together. With narratives like this, you can showcase so many different types of relationships. In my opinion, that's really interesting. Or maybe I just really like the panel of Clark telling Hal to get an apartment. Anyway, we're not here for a glimpse into Hal and Clark's fraught past, but to look at that spanking panel. Punish me, Daddy, I deserve it. There it was. Was the context what you expected? Can you look at it the same way, or did the context just make it odder for you? This isn't an amazing World's Finest issue, but it has some interesting moments and some funny ones. From prima donna Hal Jordan to the granddaddy of greatness himself, Superman, to the Atom just resigning himself to the fact that they're fighting outside and there's nothing that they can do, but the way he phrases it is, let's lean back. But he looks horrified. That panel's great. Anyway, share your thoughts down below. As well as more cursed panels it would be fun to take a look at. I want to hear from you. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.